Good afternoon, good morning to everyone. Here from Tel Aviv, Sasha Otman-Dratwa, the Executive Director of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, with Pastor Dumisani that I will introduce in a few minutes. Hi, Pastor, how are you doing?
Hey, how are you doing, Sasha?
It's a great pleasure. Thank you, first of all, very well. It's a great pleasure to have everyone here again for a CAM Meet Partner webinar. Today we have IBSI that will introduce the fantastic work they do. Again, we are so glad to have this webinar series where we can introduce one of the 340 partners of the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement. Everyone are doing a different job. Everyone work differently. Everyone are unique. And this is what we like in this coalition, that we have unique people that we are working with and trying to make the world a better place for everyone. So we are so pleased to have you with us, Pastor Dumisani, the founder and the CEO of the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, known as IBSI, a group that is dedicated to strengthening the bonds between the state of Israel, the Jewish people, and people with African descent. Black and Jews have a long history of working together for positive social change, including during the US civil rights movement on the 60s, and even in other places, when Jewish activists marched, sweat, and bleed for the cause of African American equality. We have seen beautiful pictures of these movements, of these two communities working together. Pastor Dumisani is a composer, an author, a music teacher, and obviously you're going to complete what I'm missing from your bio. He's a long-time supporter of Israel, focusing his effort in the next generation, a very important, particularly college campuses and students. You begin your activities with the Christian United for Israel, CUFI, for many years. Pastor Dumisani is also graduated of San Francisco Conservatory of Music and former director of the Zion Academy of Music in Stockholm. I hope I pronounced the name well. Also a pastor of the congregation. Pastor Dumisani last book called Zionism and Black Church, Why Standing with Israel will be defining issues for Christians of colors in the 21st centuries. I would love to hear about this book a bit more today. And obviously, to your educational program and the outreach that you do in the Afro-American communities, you make a big change, and we love to hear more about that. So without further ado, allow me to start with the first question, and a very easy one for you. If you can tell us about a little bit your history and why you start this wonderful organization.
Well, Sasha, and thank you for having me again, and thank you everyone for being here. My story in terms of Israel and Israel support really starts as a child, but since we don't have time to go all the way back, I'll say that the organization that I started, the Institute for Black Solidarity with Israel, was formed in 2013, several months after my first trip to Israel, which was 2012. 2012, December, I believe it was Hanukkah, I took my first trip to Israel, and I was part of the African American Pastors Tour with Christians United for Israel. And I had served for almost 7 years at CUFI, but I was not on staff at the time. I didn't know much about the organization. I just had some friends who were with it, and went to Israel. And it was a life-changing experience for me. And it was a long journey, kind of culminated because I came up in a Christian, the Black Baptist household, a lot of spiritual Zionism and music, and a lot of the traditions that, particularly from the segregated South. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, grew up in California, but actually born in the segregated South, and that's where my parents are from as well. So there's a lot of deep tradition that was there. So by the time I'm there at Israel, at the Western Wall, and just kind of taking it all in, I left with a deep sense to go back to the States and strengthen those bonds between the Black and Jewish community, as well as Israel, Africa. Africa is a passion of mine. So this is how the organization got started. And the reason why it's called the Institute is because our first and primary goal is education. And so we've been doing that. And my son now is the executive director. When I went to work with CUFI, I took just an advisory role with IBSI, but now I have returned at the helm. He's still the executive director, but I've returned as both a founder and now the CEO of the organization.
Wonderful. So it's a family enterprise, even more interesting. That's great. I would love to hear a bit more about the philosophy behind the support of Israel and why this is so important for you.
Well, one of the things that happened, Sasha, when I talk about from my childhood, and also this whole, I call it this Black Christian background, and I talk about it in my book, which I know we'll kind of fuse that together, Zionism and the Black Church. For me, when I use the term spiritual Zionism, I'm talking about in a very, very similar tradition of so many millions, right? When it came to the Black tradition, the songs, the sermons, those types of things. When we talk about Dr. King, even his legacy in terms of pro-Israel legacy, we see that same tradition that's there. As a matter of fact, the day before he's killed, April the 3rd, 1968, he actually alludes to Moses. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we as a people will get to the promised land. This whole ethos had been something for centuries that had been part of the Black church experience, if you will. And I was not unique in that. I came up in that same way. I think it was probably a little different for me, and maybe for some others, was that as a child, those things captivated me, right? I'm reading my Bible, and I'm probably reading the Old Testament more than the New Testament, right? I'm Moses and the patriarchs and all those things. These things are talked about, not in a political sense in the church, right? There's not a political thing about Zionism or the Palestinian human rights or anything like that, but there's this biblical part. That's pretty much how I came up. What turned for me was in high school. I believe Operation Moses was 1984. I was a junior in high school. And I remember to this day, now that it's, some 40 years later, right? I'm 54 now. I was about 16, 17 then. I was literally walking outside, going outside to play with my friends, or we're going to go play basketball or whatever. And on the news was a report, a very short report about the Ethiopian Aliyah. I didn't know what Aliyah was. I didn't know who Ethiopian Jews were. I knew nothing about the state of Israel, right? But I remember like it was last week that the picture captured me, right? I looked at the TV and I'm looking at maybe two images. One was an Ethiopian mother with her child on her back, wrapped. And another one was an Ethiopian who was kissing the ground at Tel Aviv. I did not know what I was looking at, but it grabbed my attention, right? I remember those images to this day. And that started a longer journey, understanding and exploring who Israel was, the return of the Jews to the land. This was something that captured me from a very young age.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And as an Israeli person, I'm a new immigrant to Israel. I was born in Belgium. And the first thing that you see in Israel is the Jews of colors. Jews are not the white Jews that are being presented by many anti-Semites and people that hate the Jewish people. And you see that Jewish people is really a color people from all over the world. And when you speak about the Falasha Jewish community, the Ethiopians, the Ethiopian Jews, so that's one community, but you have Jews from Iraq, from Iran, from many countries around the world, and are all different. And that's something that the world doesn't see enough. So thank you for mentioning that. Allow me now to take you into a more complicated question. We can't start this webinar without asking about the racial tension in United States in the past years, and especially with the BLM movement that on the side looks up as the organization is guiding how the relationship between the Afro-American communities in the United States and the Jewish community should look like. And historically, we know that this is not the case. And obviously, they try to take control of a certain narrative that we don't accept, at least. And this is why we are meeting today, because we want to present something else and we want to offer another path, another alternative. So I would love to hear from you. How do you see the BLM movement interfering in your activities? And what do you think about what they try to create about Israel?
Well, and for those who, please bear me, when I mention my book, it's not a shill. I'm mentioning it for those who want to go deeper. I talk about this at great length in Zionism in the Black Church, and it is on Amazon and everything, you can get it. So that's why I wanted to say that, I would preface it by saying that. BLM, having said that, is actually part of a long history of anti-Zionism directed at the Black community, not so much just in the Black community, right? But directed at the Black community. What I mean by that is that this is a strategy and a playbook, a strategy to demonize Israel by, among other things, driving a wedge between the Black and Jewish community in the United States, and also between Israel and Africa. Now, none of this is hypothesis. This is actually documented, right? Which is why I write about it in my book. And it starts with, believe it or not, Yasser Arafat and the PLO. Why Yasser Arafat and the Palestine Liberation Organization? Because the main point of their strategy to demonize Israel was for Yasser Arafat to reach out to the Black civil rights community. This is actually where it gets started in the 1960s. He reaches out to what Dr. King called the more militant, or they called themselves the more militant, the youngers, the Stokely Carmichaels who became Kwame Ture, the Eldridge Cleavers of the Black Panthers. He reached out to them, and in their passion, unfortunately also deceived many of them into thinking that quote unquote Zionists were the reasons why they were being oppressed in the United States and why they needed to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Well, this is precisely what Black Lives Matter, unfortunately, says to Black people on the streets, that the reason why Deadly Exchange, as you already know about, Sasha, is a campaign of disinformation that tells Black Americans that police brutality is a result of Israeli police training American police to be racist and shoot Black Americans, right? So that's completely ludicrous on its face. There's been police brutality even before there was the state of Israel as reborn, right? But again, this is part of the same strategy. So to your other point, what is the impact, what people may not be aware of is that in as much as that is some of the nefarious part of what Black Lives Matter does. And we talk about that in our organization. Again, obviously we're Black Americans, very proud of our heritage, proud of our community, and also very defensive when it comes to those things that bring harm. And one of those things that bring harm is to obfuscate what's going on the streets and make that part of an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has nothing to do with each other, right? What we found is that most Black Americans, and now I'm talking about not social media, I'm talking about on the ground. We talk to pastors all over the country, and we've been doing this for years, right? They are either, and pastors and church members and community leaders, they are either A, unaware of Black Lives Matter anti-Israel stance, and then also, I should say, B, along with that, once they find out about that, they're very distraught and angry and frustrated, right? They don't see the connection. They don't understand how what's going on with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to do with LA or Oakland or Chicago or Baltimore, any of those things. And they feel manipulated. Again, this is part of what we do, is actually uncover those things. So we found, Sasha, that I'll say this last part, it is unfortunate because of the age of social media and because of a hugely influential organization like a Black Lives Matter that makes anti-Israel statements and tries to connect those two things together. It is confusing. And what I'll say, what I said often, interestingly enough, when we get pushback for telling the truth, it's often not from the Black community. It's from other people who have latched on to Black Lives Matter, feeling like they're doing something on behalf of the Black community, which is a good thing, right? Our hearts are in the right place, and I want to help. I want to be a part of something that I feel is going to bring justice. It's what we found, however, is that people are often challenged to that, even though there's a moniker, Black Lives Matter, that there's actually something underneath that that's not good for Israel, but particularly not for the Black community. So believe it or not, we have great success in having that conversation, dividing those things as we're discussing within the Black community. The bigger challenge is sometimes, like I said, outside of the Black community who want to kind of latch on to something that at least idealistically is something that they aspire to.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, thank you for that. And obviously it's very sad since the both causes are important, and to mix the fight that you try to do by utilizing it as an arm against another community, it's very sad and doesn't allow for Jews to support other causes. And I think that we need to be allies in this fight. And it's so important that we fight racism together in general. But if we are not allowed to do it, the fight against racism is being affected by that. Yes, and we bring it, instead of bringing it forward, we bring it backward. And that's very sad to me. But I would love to go back now historically. As you may remember, in 1965, Martin Luther King, Dr. King, marched in Alabama with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel for a fantastic moment of hope between the two communities. That I think today is a message that we need to take from the past on what we can do for the future when one of the communities is in need, and how we should join forces to fight against hatred in general. I wanted to know, how do you remember this historical moment and what we can take from this moment in the past 40, 50 years ago to today's to rebuild this relation and to avoid what we have right now with BLM trying to structure the relation between the two communities?
Sasha, I think that that's probably the most important question in terms of the historical context and where we are now, right? So I want to take that and then and expand a little bit, right? So you have 50 plus years ago, Dr. King, Joshua Heschel, this iconic moment, right, of the Black and Jewish community. Dr. King said himself, and I quote, "There's been no other ethnic group more present in the Negro struggle for justice than the Jew," end quote. Yes. This is his exact quote, right? So yes. He was saying, not just on that march that you talked about, that picture that many of us have seen, but the 50s, the 60s, right? Joshua Heschel said about it, that march that you saw, he said, "I felt like our feet were praying," right? He felt like they were doing God's work by not just, praying for the Black community, that type of thing, but actually getting out and making change. And I tell young people all the time, the success of the civil rights movement, along with this coalition, you have the Black community, some members of the white community in terms of Presbyterian pastors, but more than any, like Dr. King said, the Jewish community, rabbis coming and putting their lives on the line, those young Jewish boys who died in Mississippi with Cheney, those who, one Black man, two Jewish young men who got killed registering people to vote, right? These types of things, literally dying so that Black people can have freedom and access here in the nation. You have all of that as a legacy that's there. And what you saw time and time again was our Jewish brothers and sisters recognizing the injustice and wanting to be a part of it. Well, the generation before Dr. King and Rabbi Joshua Heschel was Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald. And the same thing is happening. This is the early 1900s. Black people are not able to go to school. The segregation throughout the South still, the Civil War is over, but still segregation is crushing, it's defeating. And what does Julius Rosenwald do? A Jewish man who lives in Chicago, who's actually using some of his wealth to help the Jews of Russia. He's driving through the city of Chicago and he sees the deplorable conditions that Black people are living in, who are coming from the South, wanting to get a better life. He gets involved, he reaches out to Booker T. Washington, and they together build some 5,000 plus schools throughout the segregated South. They changed the course of history. And Julius Rosenwald also give scholarships to Black students to go on. People like Langston Hughes and Marian Anderson, these people go on and become famous artists and educators, these things. Again, this was Black Jewish synergy. And what's my point? My point is that the Jewish community saw what was going on, seized it, whether it was 100 years ago with Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, or 50 plus years ago with Dr. King and Joshua Heschel. Well, here now, we have challenges that are here that go beyond police brutality or criminal justice. Those things are important, but there's some other very serious things that are happening in the Black community, which is one of the reasons why IBSI again exists, because as we see, for example, education is a huge thing, right? Illiteracy within the Black community or the poor Black community is a huge thing, unlike what's been seen in almost a century. And so as we are doing what we're doing in terms of education, we are seeing once again Jewish partners. As we are doing what we're doing with our organization, we are finding no shortage of Jewish men and women who are willing to come alongside. And that's what's amazing to us in our organization, that when we reach out to our Jewish brothers and sisters and say, this is what we are doing and this is how we're trying to strengthen, we always get a reach back. There's always there are those that are reaching back. And that's part of what we share with our communities as well, that our Jewish brothers and sisters 100 years ago or today remain committed to justice. And that's always heartening for us.
And count on the combat anti-Semitism movement to stay and to remain on your side when you need us. And we know that we can count on you. And this is how it should be between our communities, not just between two organizations, between all our communities. And hopefully this message will be spread out. And this is the goal also of this webinar. I would like to take you to another question, and I will use a quote of Dr. King that said, when people criticize Zionists, they mean Jews. You are talking anti-Semitism. That was Dr. King that said. What do you think about that, especially in today's conflict, I will say, and today's perception of Jews and Zionism?
Dr. King and the civil rights community, it's important that we understand that in as much as he became the de facto leader of the movement, he spoke for himself. He said he spoke for the broader civil rights community, right? So the Black civil rights community was staunchly pro-Israel, pro-peace, were in no way anti-Arab. They were always on the side of peace, but never equivocated when it came to Israel's right to exist. And when it came to the slur of Zionist as a bad thing, right? Zionist as an attack. As a matter of fact, Dr. King's enemies called him a Zionist, right? They called him a Zionist as a pejorative, right? They said he supported Israel, he stood with Israel. I can't remember the gentleman's name right now at this moment, it is failing me, but it's back in the 1990s. He was reported as saying that he supported, he loved Dr. King, but except for the fact that he was a Zionist, right? So he liked his civil rights stance, but he hated the fact that he was a quote unquote Zionist. So Dr. King recognized then and articulated then what unfortunately gets obfuscated today. He called out that term, using that term as anti-Semitism. He unequivocally declared that using Zionists as an attack was an anti-Semitic slur, meaning someone who wanted to quote unquote control the world, all of these things were the same in the 1960s. Eldridge Cleaver, who was an anti-Zionist turned Zionist, he was the Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party. I talk about that in my book as well. He had a 180-degree turn, but he called Zionists imperialists and colonial. The same words that we hear today were being used 50 years ago for the purpose of demonizing Israel. Dr. King and the pro-Israel legacy of him, not just him in the civil rights community, were having none of it. They called out those terms, and they also condemned, later on after Dr. King had passed away, they also condemned Zionism as racism. They said that whole thing was a complete sham, and they came against it as an organized front as part of the civil rights community.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that, especially that in the past months following the last escalation of violence between Gaza and Israel, we heard the new form of Jewish hatred, that is the anti-Zionist movement, but is not new. It was always there, and thanks to Dr. King for pointing that out to everyone. And that's very important that we continue to really clarify that discriminated the Jewish state, as a Zionist entity, is discrimination against all Jews, and this is anti-Semitism. Allow me, I don't know if this question will be easy for you or complicated, but I would love to hear from you. What do you think are the greatest challenges that you face in your efforts to bring Black people and Jewish people closer? And maybe what surprised you and what you have learned that you didn't expect from in the past years that you have been working in this field?
Well, let's see here. The greatest challenge, and I often get asked that question. It's, well, I can say what it's not. It is not from the Black community. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Black man. I'm saying it's not from the Black community. When we find that synergy there in terms of the Black Jewish communities throughout the country still, right? Unfortunately, media, the people who are listening, just as you are pro-Israel advocates, consider how distorted the media presents Israel, right? Consider how warped it is. They'll tell a story and it won't look like anything like the truth. And now apply that when it comes to Black-Jewish relations in the United States, that you're going to see certain things in terms of social media that will belie the truth. That's why we say we understand what we do on social media, but we also know that's not the real world. The real world is when we are in LA, when we are in San Francisco, we're all different parts of the country, and we see synergy. So for us, the biggest challenge has not been receptivity in terms of the Black community and everything. The biggest challenge has been a lack of information, right? There's a lot of disinformation there, and we're constantly educating and giving information, and which is what we love to do, but we see that as a challenge because it is an uphill climb because there's so much disinformation. So I think the biggest challenge would be that. I think that the biggest surprise, I don't know if we've had one. We came in with some expectations, Sasha, you know what I mean? And again, I think that, I don't know if it's a surprise, but I have to re-emphasize this again. And I really, really want to make this clear. This is not hype or anything, but to be really, really honest. I'm always heartened when it comes to how the Jewish community responds, right? Rabbis, community leaders, organizations. I'm in LA right now. I was in San Diego, I'm in LA. I'm talking with some Jewish leaders about what it is that we're doing. As I return, we'll be talking to the Black pastors. We get a lot of receptivity, right? By and large, our Jewish brothers and sisters will they'll hear, they'll listen, right? And they'll say, okay, what can we do to help? There's always that Tikkun Olam thing is for real. I tell people it's real. It's not just, I'll tell a quick story. There was a Ghanaian a minister who lived in Washington, D.C. I met him years ago, right? He's a city planner. And every year he goes to Ghana and he does this whole program for the Ghanaian youth there, maybe in Accra, I can't remember what city it is, right? And he told me that whenever he does it, Sasha, he always puts out like a PBA, an all points bulletin there in his community there in Washington, D.C. for any young people. He always takes around like high school age students or whatever. He always puts out an announcement in the community to say, whoever wants to go, it's all expense paid. There's a lot of work involved, right? He says, I always put it out there for the young people to come and be a part of what we're doing. And he says, do you know who overwhelmingly responds every time? I said, he said, Jewish girls. He said, they just do. He said, every time we go and we have our final presentation in Ghana, it's like a pro-Israel event. He said, I'm not even playing this pro-Israel event. You just have Jewish young ladies, some young men as well, all over the auditorium. Why? Because he says, when you put out the things, wants to help, he said, overwhelmingly, it's the Jewish community. He just told me this randomly, right? I see this all across the country. And he said, Pastor Dumisani, I see it with my own eyes. He says, our Jewish friends, whenever I need to do something, I say, hey, I need someone to help me do this in DC or do this in Ghana. He said, the first ones to raise their hands are our Jewish brothers and sisters. And that's just real.
That's great. So thank you very much for that. I will read a tweet that you tweeted, I think 2 days ago. Okay. And I would love you to explain, I will say the philosophy behind that. And you wrote, my both parents were from segregated sort of Little Rock, Arkansas, and raised all 7 of us to be strong, independent thinker who could do whatever we want and we choose to do. I'm allergic to victimhood. Can you explain what you have behind that?
Gladly. So part of what the narrative is here, and this is, I mean, obviously I'm talking about my life, and that's true. My mom and dad, both from segregated South. My grandfather was a sharecropper, right? And all these things. So, and this is how we were raised. And this was not unique to me. And one of the reasons why I do that is particularly for younger followers, right? As I'm talking with them, as I'm sharing, because unfortunately, what often gets confused for justice or a justice movement gets mixed in with victimhood. What I mean by that? There is a fine line between me declaring or even fighting against something that's unjust and pissing and moaning and complaining about something that I think is just impacting me. And people oftentimes get frustrated by that, but it's actually true. And again, I'm talking about from my experience now as a Black man and as a person who's raised from parents who came up through segregation and the whole thing. This was never, it was foreign to us. It was my parents and their parents clearly understood what racism was, clearly understood what discrimination was. I mean, they had family members or friends who got lynched when there were no lynch laws. And I mean, my mom knew the families who desegregated Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, all these things. And so, but we were never taught that because those things were present, we could not accomplish what we needed to do, right? We were told, as a matter of fact, in old school, I say old school in terms of mentality, oftentimes young Black children would be told, because you live in a society that's going to often be racist or discriminatory against you, you have to be twice as good, right? An unfair statement, but a reality, right? So Dumisani, as a Black man, when you walk in, not only are you going to have to be accomplished, but you're going to have to prove to other people who are there that they have no right to discriminate against you because of who you are. It made us strong, as opposed to, let me look for somebody who's going to hurt my feelings so I can sit there and talk about microaggressions, right? The problem becomes when I focus on how they offended me and not me proving them wrong, I become a victim, and now I'm already debilitating myself even before I get out of the gate. And this is oftentimes a distinction that not younger people, but in terms of what's being fed to them often, right? What's being presented that looks like a justice movement often is a certain amount of victimization. So sometimes I'll share things like that, which is not uncommon, right? There are people like myself, my generation and even older, who faced all kinds of I mean, truly systemic racism, all kinds of discrimination. I'll share this quick story again. My mom graduated from Scipio A. Jones High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, the only high school that would graduate, that actually took Black students at the time. And those students went on to become amazing people. Her younger brother, my uncle, Levi Adams, went on to become one of the most noted doctors in the United States and served on the board at Brown University for decades. And his story is not unique. How were they able to accomplish those things when racism was even more crushing then than it is now? Because they refused to be dictated to, and they were going to accomplish what they're going to accomplish, even if they had to go through a difficult time to do it. That's what that tweet actually meant.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I didn't ask this question for nothing, not because it's a well-written tweet and because I agree with you, but also because it's very similar to the struggle of the Jewish people. After the Holocaust, Jews decided to not play the victimhood card. And we built a country, a Jewish state in Israel, a strong Jewish state that we are proud of, because we cannot be the victims again. And it's not just for a victimhood strategy, but it's really because you don't want to be a victim. And to not be a victim, you need to be strong, you need to be smart, you need to take responsibility of your life. And I think that what we see today is Jews that they are victim every day of hatred, of crimes. And we're fighting against it. We're going to continue to fight against it. We're going to fight very hard, but we're going to still look at the future, where we can be better, what we can improve, and we're going to take control of our future and not let anyone take the control of ourselves. And this is why also the state of Israel is so important for the Jewish people, because this is the answer to all those that hate the Jewish people historically and today. From there, I would love, if anyone has a question on Facebook or on Zoom, feel free to ask. We're going to need to wrap up soon. So I will, first of all, invite everyone to follow Pastor Dumisani on Twitter. You can find him, Dumisani Washington. He's a very interesting person to follow. So I recommend to follow, to retweet him, and to share what he says. And I would love to conclude on my end with a question about IBSI. What are the future programs that you are doing? What are your expectations for the next few years and the main achievements that you want to do?
There are three main focuses with IBSI that we do, are three essential elements of IBSI. One is content, in which will be producing videos and graphics and everything that deal with much of what we talked about here: Dr. King's pro-Israel legacy, Booker T. Washington, Julius Rosenwald, and other topics even in the modern day. There's also the Speakers Bureau, myself, my son Joshua, and my daughter-in-law Olga Mashwe, who's actually from South Africa. We speak, whether in churches, synagogues, and everything. We share these things in terms of lecture. And the third one is actually the Peace Initiative. PEACE, which is an acronym for Plan for Education, Advocacy, and Community Engagement. And that is one in which we are recruiting. We are actually launched the pilot, recruiting 20 Black American and African young people between 25 and 40 here in the States. The age is 25 and 40. We have 4 target cities. You know about those, Sasha. I don't talk about them publicly, but we do those. And we are actually, what are we doing? We're recruiting them, vetting them. They will be going through a 16-week study course, and then we will travel to Israel to have a whole nother level of education. When we're talking about Black Jewish Synergy, Israel-Africa Alliance, and all these things that pertain to Israel, they will return then to their cities, and they will be the hub of Black Jewish Synergy in their cities. Everything from arts and performing arts to education to any of those things when it comes to how the communities come together, and also advocating just both for the state of Israel, but also for a strong Israel-Africa Alliance. They will be those ambassadors. We call them IBSI ambassadors. So again, we've actually launched the pilot now. I'm doing some work on that now, so I'm in California right now. And we're talking with pastors in different parts of the country who are recommending those young people. This is how we believe we push this narrative forward and really affect this positive change on the ground. Again, not because there's all these breaks between the Black and Jewish community, but because of how it's being presented. We're going to be able to go on the ground. I'll say this last thing. We're also part of my friend, African Outreach Coordinator for CUFI, Dr. Francis Tabla, hosts a huge Africa Night to Honor Israel every year. I will be in Philadelphia and in Milwaukee, or not Milwaukee, I'm sorry, in Minneapolis in October, as will our staff, as part of those celebrations when the African and Jewish communities come together right here in the States. We're part of that as well. We're part of supporting that effort as well. We didn't originate it, but we support those efforts. Again, the Black Jewish community and also the African and Jewish communities, we're excited about doing it as well.
Wonderful. So you spoke about your son and Olga and yourself as speakers. So I recommend everyone to invite you as wonderful speakers to tell your story and to engage with more people. And really congratulations in everything that you do. And by leading IBSI to new great success. And we are behind you. We are here to support your work. We love what you do. We need this relationship. It's critical that we make it heard by many, many others. So thank you for everything that you do. And if you have any closing word that you want to say.
Well, just thank you, Sasha, and Combat Anti-Semitism also for your support and your help. We really do appreciate it. You are one of the examples when we say about our Jewish friends who see what we do and are reaching out. Again, we are very heartened by that, not surprised because we've seen it for years now. So we appreciate that. We are excited, as I share with people all the time. We see the negative things that are happening out there, but we're excited because we believe we're going to see a great move forward. We believe, like the same thing in the spirit of Dr. King and Joshua Heschel, in the spirit of Booker T. Washington and Julius Rosenwald, that here we are at a moment in time when the synergy is needed like never before. And so we're excited about being a part of that because we believe we're going to see some great things moving forward here. And also when it comes to Israel, Africa. So this is a great time, we believe, to be alive.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And we'll just say that the webinar will be available on the combatantisemitism.org website if anyone missed it or watched just a part of it, so you can watch the full recording on our website. I invite everyone to join our newsletter, to join our movement, to sign the pledge, to stay updated on other partners' webinars that we're going to do, other activities. And I would love to invite everyone to join. By the way, you're co-sponsoring this event as IBSI tomorrow at 1 p.m. New York time, EDT, the first ever Central America Forum for Israel, when 7 states from Central America are coming together to show and to share their support for Israel and the Jewish people, and to speak about the fight against anti-Semitism, why it's so important for them. We're going to have the President of Guatemala, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Israel, and many other wonderful leaders from the United States, Senator Rosen, Senator Langford, the Governor of Texas, and many others. So it will be a great event. So I invite everyone to join it, to find where it's going to be, centralamerica.combatantisemitism.org. You can register. It's still open for registration. And thank you very much to all. So Pastor Domisani, I look forward to continue to working with you for this important task that we have. And I wish you all the best. And we're going to be here to support everything that you do. So thank you very much. And thank you to all those that watch this webinar today.
Thank you, Sasha.